My name is Jorge Aguilar, and I'm the founder and CEO of Trove, a hospitality and real estate company based out of Chicago, and I'm honored and delighted to be presenting and moderating this conversation tonight on behalf of Start Out and its Chicago chapter. I want to thank my co-committee colleague, Darien, Marion, Burton, for all the hard work he put to make this event happen tonight. And a big thank you as well to Amanda Coopersmith in the San Francisco office and Alex Brightman in New York for keeping us in line, and to David Alfini for giving both Darien and I the opportunity of being to be of service. So FYI for everyone that is here tonight, this event is getting recorded. So it'll be posted on the Start Out YouTube channel shortly after we are done. A big welcome and a thank you to everyone who's joining us tonight. As of March, Start Out has been hosting its events, which ordinarily would have been hosted in a physical space, online instead. This is a wonderful advantage to many people who could perhaps not have joined us in the city. Now, people in every neighborhood and in every suburb and indeed in every town across America can join us, and we're very grateful for that. Start Out's mission is to increase the number, diversity, and impact of LGBTQ+ founders and amplify their stories to drive the economic empowerment of the group. This is done through programming, networking, and many other resources. If you have not already done so, I invite you to take a close look at startout.org. I'm a proud member of the Chicago chapter programming board. If you're interested in membership or you have ideas on how we can continue to add value through programs and events, please feel free to reach out directly to me. Today's conversation is sales for non-salespeople, and it's a topic that really resonates with me. As CEO, whether you know it or not, and whether you like it or not, you are the chief sales officer of your company. No other part of the business matters if you don't sell your product or service. It's the most important skill an entrepreneur should have and should polish. We have an outstanding panel that I'm very excited to be speaking with today. So I will introduce them to you guys in alphabetical order. Randy Ford. Randy started First Story Strategies in 2016 to help nonprofits, small businesses, and families use the principles of storytelling to talk about what matters to them and the impact they have on the world. His background is in journalism, politics, communication strategy, and policy advocacy. Welcome, Randy. Jay Lee. Jay is the creator of Prototype Thinking Labs and innovation consulting for large corporations, startups, and nonprofits. She's passionate about bringing lessons from accessibility to reinvent design and work. Jay, thank you so much. Bryan Porter. Bryan started Be Creative Consulting Designs in late 2018, an independently owned crafting and design firm specializing in logo designs and personalized apparel, drinkware, and marketing material. His professional background is in project management, non-for-profit organizations, and fundraising. Thank you, Bryan. And Danielle Vincent, co-founder of Outlaw soaps. After spending nearly a decade working in digital product management for major entertainment networks, including Oprah, ABC, and ABC Family, Danielle pulled up her rubber gloves and started a soap business with her husband. 7 years later, Danielle and her Outlaws are available worldwide, including Whole Foods. And yeah, she really did hate sales and still does. So I'm very excited about this the diverse expertise on this panel and all the expertise that you bring to this virtual table. A note for the audience as we speak, in the Q&A section, let us know your questions and let us know the biggest takeaways you'd like to take and what questions you'd like answered. We're going to be monitoring them as we start the conversation, and where it makes sense, we'll weave them into the conversation. Otherwise, we will wait until the last 20 minutes of our presentation and allot that time for Q&As. So let's start with our conversation, guys. I think a lot of people who are interested in this discussion recognize that they're not natural salespeople, but also recognize that they need to improve and get comfortable polishing their sales approach. So my first question to you guys is, what was that coming to Jesus moment, if you will, that recognition that sales was really important and that you better focus on that as an entrepreneur? Randy, why don't we start with you?
Sure, and thanks for having us all. You mentioned in my bio, Jorge, that some of the things that I had done in my background, and you may notice that sales was not in there at all. The closest I ever came to even working retail was I was a Subway sandwich artist for a while, and you come into Subway knowing that you want a mediocre sandwich, so I might sell you some bacon, but that's about it. So I did work business development for a company when I was in DC, but it was a 50-person company, so we were pulling together proposals to do big contracts, and I did love that. But really, when I started my business almost 4 years ago now, I had that realization that I'm no longer representing somebody else or a bigger company, and sales for a one-person company is all about selling myself as well as my brand, and that there's no difference there, and that I needed to break away from the DC style networking. That if we have people from DC, I still love DC, but I think they will know that the networking there is very much about the firm handshake. Who do you work for? Where'd you go to school? Who do you know? What do you do now? What can you do for me? Collecting business cards and following up, and it's very transparent. And it took me a while to realize that in other markets, now in Chicago, that there can be a much more organic opportunity for networking and meeting people and getting information out there about your product. And it then still went through some of the networking stuff where, I hate where you have a beer in one hand and a crab cake in the other, and you're trying to shake people's hands, and none of those networks, anybody you meet from that, you leave and you don't have any connections from that. So it took a while to realize that sales meant putting myself out there as my brand and meeting people and doing it in the most organic and natural ways that I could.
Organic and natural is key, right? Because I think sometimes as entrepreneurs, not natural born salespeople, we feel that any attempt at sales just comes unnatural to us.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't come natural to me. But then when I rethink about it, and I think it's not sales, it can be just meeting people and having conversations. That makes it much more achievable, much more like something I feel like I can tackle than sales with a capital S or networking with a capital N.
Right. Bryan?
Hey, again, thanks for having us on here, Jorge. And start out, I would have to say my professional background is in project management as well as corporate fundraising. My sales techniques came from early ages when I postgraduate, working at Macy's and women's shoes. And so I had no idea what I was doing, but they knew I had a knack for engaging with people. And so started out really low and, just kind of introducing myself to women as they, browse the department and whatnot. And so over time, I realized that it wasn't really about the selling of the shoes. It was about the engagement and the building rapport with the customer. And so to what Randy was saying, it's all about selling yourself. And I think the product sells itself after that. So I had to say that would be my aha moment, if you want to say, in sales.
Yeah, I think earlier we were talking about something similar, and I said I had a similar start in business, I guess, in selling shoes. But we weren't on commission or anything. And I feel that if we had been on commission, my training would have been self-inspiring earlier on. So instead it took me years, but thank you for that, Bryan. Jay, let's go to you.
Hi. So I work in corporate consulting. So my specialty with respect to sales is B2B sales, kind of medium to large deal sizes, typically between 10K to 100K, on average, sometimes higher, sometimes lower. And I think right now in my company, I do probably 90% of the sales closing and maybe 20% of the sales opening or so. But I started at my last company where I was brought on to run the training division because my background is in business consulting, right? So they're like, you get to have your own department. And I'm like, awesome, I've never had my own department before. And they're like, you get to land your own clients. And I'm like, what? Like, and this is like part of like a larger organization. I'm like, don't we have another sales team for this? Can they just like bring me clients and then I will consult and solve their problems? And they're like, no, you're going to be like a self-starter. Go and start. So yeah. So I was like, okay. So I went out and like, I just found a bunch of people who are like already kind of in our network or interested in us. And I was like, so let me show you some value and do some consulting and stuff. So we like go back and forth on a few calls and like, we'd get like 2 or 3 calls in and I'm like, yeah, so they really like talking to me. And so my boss, who's like the CEO, was like, yeah, so go and close them. And I was like, what? And he's like, no, like go and, make them sign a contract. You have already like done a bunch of stuff for them. If they want anything else from you, like they have to pay us. I'm like, okay. So like the first time it's like super awkward, right? I'm like, hi, so yeah, I want to be talking to you about your problems, but instead like give me $10,000. Okay. And they're like, yeah, okay. And I was like, oh, wow. All right. So then I did it like 10 more times and it was always super awkward for a while until I realized that like 100% of the awkwardness was with me and everybody I talked to was like not expecting me to do anything with them for free and they were waiting for the sales conversation to happen. So like instead of doing it on like the 5th call, now I do it on like the 1st call and it's like fine.
What kind of self-talk did you have to do? Because it requires a lot of self-confidence, right? To say, all right, here I go, or here CEO, pay me 6 figures for this. Was any part of like self-confidence involved in like just getting you more comfortable with it?
I mean, to be honest, like giving myself a pep talk wouldn't really have made a difference because I mean, I definitely like come from a more socially reserved cultural background too, right? Like in the end, you just have to do it because that was my job. And if I didn't make the money, I wasn't going to get paid in this department. I was so happy to be running, like wasn't going to get funded. So like, I just like forced myself to do it. And once you force yourself to do it a few times, then it's less awkward every time. And like, now I actually love it. Like sometimes like I actually have a letdown when I move from the sales part of the conversation to the actual service delivery part of the conversation because I enjoyed the sales part so much.
That's really nice. I mean, I saw an ad once in a magazine. I think it was like a Rotary magazine, an organization that I love, but it was a woman carrying 2 big buckets of water and it said, when you must, you do.
Yeah, exactly. Like you just have to, and then you just figure it out and it's fine.
Yeah. Good. Danielle?
Yeah, so thank you so much. And I love that because sometimes you do just have to like look at the bottom of the well and go, I don't want to jump down there. Well, I better get selling. And yeah, so I say I hated sales because I grew up, one of my first jobs was doing political fundraising, dialing for dollars and calling like just random people on a list, asking them if they would give money. And that sucked. Like, I don't know anybody who loves it, but I sure didn't love it. And so when we started our own business, I thought that that was what it was going to be. And what I've learned is that it's, that honestly, it's a lot easier because if you're genuine, and I could genuinely and enthusiastically talk about our products for about 7 hours straight. And so that enthusiasm is either contagious or it's not. And if somebody is not feeling my enthusiasm, they're not right. They're not my right customer. And that's okay. That's totally fine. And taking that stress, taking that pressure off. Yeah, you have to close. I mean, Jay, you're absolutely right. Like it's hard to close. It's hard to get that signature on that line or now, the pixels on the contract, but that's what sales is. That's really what sales is. So, yeah.
How do you deal with like rejection, for example? I mean, how many no's do you get and how do you react to that?
For me, it's always about repeating to myself in my head, well, they're just not my customer, or they're not my customer right now, or wow, they should read about me on the cover of the Wall Street Journal in 3 years. That's if it's really a burned rejection, then I'm always like, whatever, they don't know. That's where a little arrogance really helps.
Yeah. Does it get easier?
To hear no, yeah, it does. I mean, I think that there's a lot of fish in the sea. You really get to know that there's so many people out there that are not your customer. I often say that our products are for 10% of the population. And that means that 90% of the population are going to have a violently dislike relationship to me and what I'm selling. And that's got to be okay, or I'm in the wrong business. Like
Yeah.
that's not a niche. If you don't have a group of people who are going to be opposed to your product, then you don't have a niche.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Can I speak to that actually?
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
I think for me, and actually this is a lot of why I came to love sales, is that it comes down to integrity. Like the sales relationship is fundamentally should be a very high integrity relationship in which you are creating an experience for someone in order to give them genuine value that you profoundly believe in. And if that value is right for them, then the sale works, right? Or it turns out there's something logistic, like you're pricing your product wrong or something, and then you just learn and fix it, right? And if it's not right for them, then the good karma thing is for you guys to part ways. And as long as you're willing to walk away from the sale, if you don't feel like they're the right customer for you, then it means that ultimately, like, it's a net karma win no matter what happens. And
Yeah.
also then that person will know what it means to work with you and know why they walked away. So when they meet somebody who is a right fit for you, they remember they had that positive karma interaction with you, and they send you back, and they send them back to you, right? And like, we have sales cycles of sometimes like a year and a half at the longest, right? So it's really painful to like work on a year and a half and 80 pages of proposals, right, for this like $250 deal or a $50K deal or whatever, and then suddenly at the end they're like, no, actually we reorged and it's not right for us.
Yeah.
Right. But like, I did my best at every point. Like, I never overextended myself. I never gave anything that I regretted giving. And then at the end of the day, like, those people are the people who come back 2 years later in their new company to come and buy something else from us.
So it's like throwing seeds out constantly and watching them grow over time, and then
Yeah, and you win either way, right? You treat people in a way that wins no matter what.
right. I think was it Warren Buffett, and I think about this often, like no business ever went like belly up or something, bankrupt, that delighted its customer every single time.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah.
part of how what I tell myself when I'm in sales meetings is, like, you are offering a fantastic service, and it be so good that this stuff sells itself.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
prose, what is it, like campaign and prose or campaign and poetry and govern and prose. It later is different when you're working with your clients, but at least that's the approach.
Sales pitch: if you want to build a product that sells itself, call us, because that's what our company does.
I mean, quality, yeah, so much of what I think this is part of what you learn as an entrepreneur, obviously, is you're incredibly passionate about your product and what is it, the value that you're driving. You just have to break through that self-awareness to, make others know about it. Let's go to some of the questions that we have here. Let me see.
While you're looking that up, I would love to make a point on what both Jay and Danielle mentioned a little bit about, if the client doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for you. Because I think sometimes, especially early on, a lot of entrepreneurs, I definitely felt like I had to say yes to everything. If somebody came along with something and they're like, can you do this? I would have to say, yeah, I can, and then figure out a way to make it work. But it's not really a good success, a long-term success strategy to do that, in my opinion. I think you have to realize that you have as much control and can swipe left just as easily as they can if something doesn't seem like it's going to be the right fit, or it takes you off track for what your long-term goals are and what you really want to be doing.
Great. There's a new question here. New salespeople will do anything to avoid picking up the phone. What suggestions does the team have to overcome call reluctance?
I can say something about this because I had a lot of PTSD around that down for dollars experience. So I had a lot of resistance to picking up the phone when I first started out. And the way to overcome it for me was to literally have a check mark or check boxes every single day for a certain number of calls that I had to make. And so you just keep checking the boxes. Like for me, I think it was 7 at first, because that was an incredibly high number. I hate talking on the phone, and 7 was a lot, but it was really important to get over it. And you realize that over time, and I think, Scott, this is exactly what you're talking about. Over time, you realize that the stakes are not nearly as high as they feel when you're first starting out. The stakes feel outstandingly high when you're first cold calling people, when you're first trying to make that connection. You feel rude, you feel uncertain, you feel awkward. And that is fine. And like Jay said, that anxiety, that nervousness that's all inside you. It's not on the person who you're calling. So I think just plowing through that, having a checklist, making sure that you make your calls every single day is the only real way of doing it. Just desensitization.
Yourself.
Yeah, just do it.
Yeah. And I go back to like the self-confidence, right? Like it takes self-confidence to call people, and it takes, it also takes self-confidence to deal with rejection and not be crushed. And also I think in the stakes are, it seems like if you don't make the sale, the world's going to collapse, but it surely won't. Like I think you were saying earlier, there's a lot of fish in the sea.
Don't think of the purposes of the call as to close the sale, because then if you don't, you just feel bad. Think of the purposes of the call as like you're going to try some stuff to learn how to make the call better. So after every call, as long as you learn at least one thing to do better next time, then you win, no matter what.
Yeah, there's a really good question here. How does your LGBT identity play out in your sales process or strategy? Do you leverage it if you do? Bryan, can we start with you? You may need to unmute yourself.
Yes, I would have to say I don't use my identity to leverage when selling sales. I don't think the product that I have, the products that I sell, is geared toward one specific identity of a person, individual. It's open to gay, straight, queer individual. So no, I don't.
Randy?
Yeah, one of the ways that I leverage it is through the organizations that I use for networking. So I network with people from we have the great LGBT Chamber of Commerce of Illinois, as well as the National LGBT Chamber, and just kind of through the people that I associate with. So I am a certified LGBT owned business enterprise, but I don't use that as the main selling point. But I am very open about it because my work is all about helping people tell their stories. And I want to make sure that I'm as open with my story as possible, because if I'm not willing to do that, then what right do I have to ask people to trust me with their stories? So it's something that I discuss when it seems time. And then, as far as relationship building, it comes in handy meeting people that way.
Cool.
I just want to, so for our products, we really did something that was a bit different. We have decided not to gender our products. And so that was a deviation from personal care. And that was a real conscious decision in the beginning, just because I am not a super gender oriented person. And so it is hard when I call a place and they're like, oh, we need to bring in men's products. And I have to dance around like, well, I'm so glad that you want to carry our products. And do I even mention that it's not just for men? Usually I say something like, well, I use our products, so don't say they're just for men. But it's hard, it's really hard. And I don't leverage it. I don't really talk about it because a lot of the places I'm calling would probably be uncomfortable about it, just in terms of part of the narrative. And so it's a complicated question. And I'm glad that you asked that, AJ. That's a really good question.
How does the labeling on the products, how is that structured? Are your products labeled any which way that would indicate?
No, I've gone to
one way or the
Cirque
other?
du Soleil style writing contortions to make sure that our products don't have any gender references on the writing on the back or anything. We really have, even there's a romance one, and it manages to stay gender new, all gender or gender ambiguous. So it's really, it is something that we really had to work hard towards. And there's so many reviewers who come in and say, this is a manly product. And it's a hallmark of our culture.
When you're, because you probably deal with a lot of corporate buyers, right?
No, we don't. So we mostly do, so for Whole Foods, for example, that's our biggest corporate buyer. And they are super on board with our identity. And it's nice to feel seen and cherished. And that's been a really nice relationship. But for the little gift shops that, are across the US, those, most of those gift shops just think of us as a men's product.
Okay.
So,
You find that when you meet buyers or potential clients that are, and maybe this is for everyone, that are LGBT, you just have a more natural, quicker connection point to them. And sometimes it's hard to connect with, depending on who you are, where you are, but sort of someone who is just, not LGBT plus. I mean, I think at least for me, it's easier usually when I meet someone because immediately we can connect, if nothing else, on that one point.
I think Brene Brown had a thing where she talked about this thing that she says before every talk, which is people, people, people. Everybody's just people. And we may have ideas about who they are, but at the end of the day, we're selling to a person. We're not selling to a corporation. And that's I think, something that's really important to remember, is that you get to be yourself and you get to sell to a person. And that, I think, each person on this panel has talked about the personal connection. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Jay, what do you think?
I think I totally second that. I think being queer and also disabled, I kind of spent a lot of my time thinking about my identity. And that kind of gave me pros and cons, right? The pro is that I'm also really, really sensitive to other people's identity, and kind of, you just kind of come up and get better at emotional labor, which in our industry, because it's so much about the individual personalities of these specific humans that you are selling to, allows me to wrap my sales experience around each person that I'm talking to. But it also meant that I had to kind of unlearn that the thing that I was selling and the way that the sale went wasn't about me personally, right? That for them, they're literally employees of a large corporation spending somebody else's money because it is their job to spend that person's money. It is not even their own money, right? It is not personal for them at all. And whether they pick me or not is not personal in any way. And being able to kind of separate that, I think, was a bit of a longer journey for me. But it was very liberating once I got there.
Yeah. How
What
do you
about
guys?
you, Jorge?
What about me?
Yeah.
We're in real estate and hospitality, and the hospitality is, I usually find it easier to connect when I come across an LGBT person there's just, like I said, a natural affinity, and they don't necessarily become clients, but right off the bat, there's just that natural connection that just helps us have at least a more original conversation the first 5 minutes, because there's a sense of, I get you a little, whether it's real or not, there's that sense. How do you guys, we have a lot of questions about leads. And so I know we've talked about a lot of the sales here come from networking, but when it comes to generating leads, if you've ever had to do that, or whenever you have had to do it, how do you go about that? Who wants to go at that? Randy?
I can, because I don't think that it's the traditional thing, and I'm curious to hear what the other people's answers are. But for me, it is all about referral networking. So I am not a cold call person. It really is about building relationships with people who can speak to what I do and send people my way. So that's why, and that is why I make sure that I'm in LGBT networking organizations, because you're right, there is kind of a shared experience there of some sort. It could be, it almost makes it as natural as if it's somebody I went to high school with. I don't talk to many of the people I went to high school with, but still you have like something that you have as a shared thing that can be a jumping off point for that relationship. I'm very active in BNI. I'm not sure if many people are familiar with that. I'd be happy to talk to people about it after if it's something you want to know, but that's an international referral networking group. And for me, that has been the biggest source of my leads, because you have the opportunity every week to get to know the people who are in your BNI chapter. And the sole purpose is because we really like each other, we want to support each other's small businesses, but is that they learn to trust me, understand what I do, and help kind of be a sales force in a way by bringing referrals of the people they think are good connections for me.
Yeah, one of my questions I had in my notes here was, cold calling versus networking. What's your approach? And I think people, at least for our business, a lot of our business was a result of networking, right? And clients just kind of found their way to us, and that was nice. But at some point for us, we said, well, this is great, but we're growing slowly, because every single client that we add is a referral, and that's wonderful because they're just easier to work with and we like them and all that. It's the perfect client. But we need a marketing effort, right? So that we grow faster. And that was a whole other sort of set for us. It was very different, right? Than just deliver great results and wait for our clients to give us more business. So what about you guys? What about you, Bryan? Where do you stand on lead generation and cold calling versus networking? You'll want to.
Cold calling is just something that I don't do. A lot of my business comes from referrals or from social media as well. So I generate a lot of sales via social media. I post.
And we could probably have a whole other call on sales on social media.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's
literally a whole call. Yeah. Social media has been literally the saving grace of my business as well, even during the COVID-19 pandemic as well. So,
what do you do there? Tell us about, is it like ads or just your own postings, or how does business trickle in from social media?
Again, like Randy, I'm a one-person business. So typically when I generate ideas, I do my think tank essentially with myself. I have different groups that I'm affiliated with on social media platforms that, kind of like share their ideas and techniques that they're doing in that business realm. And I kind of like just trial and error, like again, with what Danielle was saying, try it out. If it gets a hit, you continue to keep going. And if you kind of just, okay, we're going to move on to the next section. So social media and referrals have been really helpful with building my business as well.
Yeah, good. Danielle?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much what everybody else has said. I have no real thing to add.
Yeah, well, I think when your sales depend on networking, it's implied that cash flow is sufficient to maintain, to keep you afloat. You don't depend on tomorrow's sale to keep the lights on, right? And I think when you're in that position, you're really fortunate, because keep networking away and hopefully things get better. But I think it relieves a lot of pressure when you have, I don't know, I almost want to call it the luxury of driving sales through networking.
I think there's a couple dimensions here, right? So one is the question of runway, like how much time do you have at the beginning to get your engine going? Right, and how quickly can you get there, and what can you do to jumpstart it? That's one question. Another question though is, if you've been running for a year and a half and your engine still doesn't run itself, then kind of your problem likely lies with your product and not with your sales process. But that said, like we do probably the closest to cold calling that we do cold emailing. So like, we do prospecting on LinkedIn. I mean, there are only like, some few thousand people in the country that count as prospective clients. For us, it's easy for us to do it that way. But like, so we prospect like manually on LinkedIn, like everyone in Chicago with innovation in their title, right? And then we use Hunter.io to kind of to pull what their emails are likely to be, and then send them pre-scripted email chains and so on. So we did that for a number of years, and then we also went to conferences and gave talks, or like, we participated in panels like this one, but on innovation. And the panels gave us like drastically more hits. There's a reason why nobody does like cold calling anymore. It's because it's not actually that effective relative to effort, right? Like the effective thing is getting an example that is visceral of the value that you can add in front of them, right? Like how many people are going to leave this event and like go look up Outlaw soaps? Like I don't freaking care about soaps, but I'm gonna do it because I'm sold, because I've been thinking about these soaps for like the past 20 minutes, right? And like that's kind of like, this isn't a soap sales experience, but it's gonna happen, right? So like that's how you get like people at the beginning of your funnel though. Like they get exposed to it somewhere, somehow, and depending on your specific thing, you're going to find the right channels to get them exposed.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by like the product that you sell, because you are whale hunting constantly, Jay. And so how nerve-wracking is that like I said, the business has got to be pretty stable for you to constantly be just hunting whales.
It's inefficient, and like cash flow is definitely a factor for us. Like given that our typical sales cycle is about a year. Though like I will say COVID has drastically shortened that, because it means that like the majority of service delivery is online, so anybody can reach anybody now, and everybody's standards for service delivery have also changed. So we're seeing our sales cycles shorten enormously and closing more deals than ever since COVID, which surprised the hell out of me, but apparently that's true.
Can you explain a little better why is that? Why?
I don't have the data to feel comfortable speculating on that. I know that with our customers, they're still running with the same budgets as last year, and corporate has not yet been hit by the economic decline the way small businesses have. But they have fewer places to spend that budget, and spending it on things that are more innovation essential, or like, because also our niche is that we're really, really fantastic at a specific thing. Like we're highly differentiated. So spending it on like a highly expert service seems to work out for them.
Wonderful. That's good news.
Yeah, it is. And I know other consultant friends have also had similar experiences, if they're in the problem solving space, at least.
Good. Let's, speaking of COVID, let's talk about how COVID has impacted your sales, everyone else's. Bryan, have you had have sales gone up, gone down, gone frozen? Where are you with that?
Yeah, so with the pandemic starting, initially I was not on board with trying to sell within the pandemic, but I took the the leap of faith and joined in the numerous of businesses and companies that are producing these face masks to wear, and so that has been really the saving grace, I think, for me selling the face mask and things of that nature to at a good margin as well, to be able to be competitive with the other businesses as well. So I would say my sales have gone up probably 100 to 200%.
Well, that's wonderful. Good. Randy?
I can say that, like Bryan, I didn't want to go out and try to capitalize on what everybody has been going through and thinking about. But, there was a question, I believe, Darien said there was a question to follow up on how referrals and really just networking and talking to people can lead to sales. And for me, the COVID-19 pivot, God, I'm so tired of that word, but anyway, was because of the referral marketing and networking that I had done. So as people realized that they needed to update their bio or their resume, I have enough people who I've got like feelers out with who know, oh, I know somebody who can do that, and it's Randy. And so there was really a kind of organic shift of my work. I was no longer doing in-person storytelling for communication workshops at corporations. Those have all been postponed or canceled, but I had a lot of people coming to me who needed to go take advantage of some of the services I offer to help people think through what is their story and what are their next steps. So I helped a lot of entrepreneurs who, because they were laid off or furloughed or whatever other economic impact they were feeling, had no choice but to finally jump into that business that they've been wanting to do for a long time. And so
Yeah.
they had the opportunity to do this, but they didn't know where to start on how to talk about it. And so fortunately, because I had been able to build enough referral people out there who have developed an understanding of what I do, that ended up being much more effective for me than cold call. I'm not going to cold call people and say, hey, I'm a writer and storytelling strategist, because what even is that? Is their first question. And then their second question is, why are you still talking to me? So the natural network that I had is really what helped me be able to transition to COVID-19 related work.
I want to come back and talk about how storytelling can impact sales, because that's one of the things that I think about for our business. We are in real estate and hospitality. And so if we can sort of tell a story, and not even just, if we can sort of through social or through any other marketing channel, tell the story of how wonderful it is to spend time at any of our properties. Like it's not unique. I think every hospitality player tries to do that, but how do we craft a story that is unique to us and attracts the very specific kind of customer that we think is the best fit for us? And I mean, I'm sure you have something to say about how storytelling can affect every single sale. Let me come back and talk to Danielle really quick about COVID sales, and then we'll come back to storytelling and selling.
Yeah, I think something that everybody on this call is really, I mean, especially Bryan, your, mask thing. That's like, I think every challenge in it has the seed of a greater opportunity. And that's really the thing that, like, as things get worse, there's always a place for things to get better. And that's something that is really challenging, because like looking at our sales and watching Amazon, as our delivery times extended out through the end of time, and our wholesale sales just almost completely dried up, except for Whole Foods, God bless them. And like, it was just one of those really like, oh shit, what are we doing here? March was hard. And then in April, I was like, okay, we're making lemonade. What are we doing? And, then I realized, oh, we're people who sell evocative soap in a market when people have to wash their hands 35 times a day. Why am I not out there celebrating? Like, why am I not, like, I should be just doing a happy dance, that this is our golden moment. As long as we can all stay safe, we're selling the thing that people need. Yeah. And that realization, because, I spent probably 2 weeks in a state of existential crisis. I think everybody did in March. Just a state of complete existential crisis. And just bringing that existential crisis and being like, oh my gosh, we are the people. This is our time. Like, that was a moment of real transformation of what it was a webinar just like this. And somebody said, so if you have the resources to do so, focus on gaining market share right now, because your competitors are constricting, they're contracting, and you move forward. And I was like, oh, it like snapped me out of it. And so now I pass that to you.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think everyone in business, everyone in the world probably was just sort of in shock and didn't know where to look and what was coming. And like those first few days were just bizarre. They were like out of this world. I mean, we're in hospitality, and you can imagine the collapse that was. But we had to quickly pivot, and it was sink or swim. If ever there was a situation where we had to sink or swim, that was it. So thankfully we came out fine. The inventory was moved from hospitality to just regular real estate. But yeah, I was making that lemonade out of those lemons in those first couple of days was.
It's hard not to be
some
paralyzed
sour
by
lemonade.
fear. I mean, it was just paralyzing. I don't know how sounds like, yes, this is a common experience, but yeah, I just couldn't even believe it. I was like, oh, this is it. This is the end. I should just go dig my own grave now, but I get depressed.
This is also like a completely new world, and it is absolutely just as completely new for everyone. So suddenly almost the playing field is leveled, right? Like exactly as Danielle said, like if you're the one who moves forward, then you have the advantage. Because if you feel like 20% confident about what's going on, no one in the world is a better expert than you are.
Yeah.
Like nobody actually has better answers than you do. So you might as well just run with whatever you've got, and you can move faster than the incumbents.
Yeah, I think that's key. The experts don't know any more than anyone else. In specific topics, right? As it relates to the direction of business and the direction of like, at first for us, it was like, well, hospitality will never be the same, ever, ever, ever. Student housing, it was interesting. So let's go.
There was a lot of reluctance about whether it even felt appropriate to sell to people at the time. And I do a lot of work with nonprofits, and I was talking with a nonprofit fundraiser. This gets back to the dialing for dollars thing. And so her nonprofits were just completely devastated that they were not going to be able to raise money. They weren't going to be able to hold their events. And she said, really let your funders decide whether they're in a position to continue supporting your nonprofit. That's not up to you to decide whether they still want to contribute to the causes that they've decided in the past are important to them. And that kind of stuck in my brain as something that I have watched, and I think the people who have been most successful at kind of finding their new path in this have kind of taken that approach to heart.
Definitely, really, I can definitely attest to that. Being the chairman of my alumni association, I was in the midst of, myself and my team were in the midst of planning 3 fundraisers for the rest of the year. And literally we were going to put a deposit down that Friday, and it was like, nope, everything shut down. I was like, wow. So it was a big burden. I was like, so what do we do now? All of our events were, in-person events, where now, social distancing is a huge thing. So that can't exist. And so we really had to go to the table and kind of decide, how do we push forward with, still being able to raise funds for students to attend our university within the next few months. And so this whole, Zoom conference call, we're managing to come up with some interesting ideas to try to push forward. And like you said, Randy, let our funders decide. And so we put fillers out there, and, we actually got a very great response than we typically do. When people come to the events, people were giving it 200% and 300% more due to the situations that we were in as well.
It was amazing how things so quickly shifted and shaped. It's fascinating to watch, and it'll be fascinating for the next few years. Randy,
just say something. So
we've
talked about how sales and business has changed after COVID, but I feel like I kind of wanted call out that I think an even bigger question is the question of how we want to look at business and changing how we do sales right now in a time of racial trauma and police brutality and abuse of Black people. And that's a much deeper question, I think, for a lot of our businesses, because the answer isn't some, is absolutely not, right? Like capitalize on the situation. It's like the absolute opposite, right? Like the answer is like, how do we actually rethink like how we're approaching our own social responsibility and who we're highlighting and what situations we're highlighting and what we're contributing to, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's up in the air, right? For a lot of, I mean, I don't think it's completely clear yet what direction that'll go. What are you seeing for like your industry?
I mean, for us, like when COVID hit, we moved quickly. Like the first week of lockdown, we were giving webinars left and right. But at the point now that like we don't have Black people on our team, we're a primarily Asian team, right? And like, so we felt like it was time for us to kind of quiet down our business for a while and think about our hiring practices, and think about, kind of, so we're slowing down right now because we feel like now is the time for us to learn and do a lot of introspection.
Yeah.
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 We really had to do a lot of soul searching for our products because I knew that there were some not, how do I say, well, okay, I'm just going to call them out, some racist folks in our customer base. And we did come out, it took a lot to know that we were going to potentially lose people in our customer base. If I said something, but it was too important to me not to say anything. And so we did come out, we talked about Black Lives Matter in our blog and how important that was. And yeah, some people failed. And at one time I was sad and afraid that we were going to lose our financial, that there was going to be financial repercussions, but it was more important to me to do that than to feel like we had compromised on our humanity and on our responsibility to be humans in this situation. So,
yeah. Mission over profits, and not even mission, but moral integrity, right? Randy, let's go back to the storytelling aspect, and as it relates to COVID and to BLM and everything else. How do you see that shaping up?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the idea of storytelling in sales, I think, has become like a cliche kind of thing that people don't know how to make work. And so when people hear it, they might think that they might think of story time as opposed to storytelling. So it's, once upon a time there was a bar of soap. That's not how to do it, or once upon a time there was a dirty person who needed a shower. What storytelling is about in terms of a business principle is really more about understanding the things that have made stories so successful as a communications method since before we even had language. It was that it was about characters, it was about experiences that we could learn from, it was about sharing information. And I have a whole half day or full day thing that we could do about this, but I'll just show you like the quick janky version of this thing that happened to be sitting on my desk. Is there's a concept called the storytelling triangle that a lot of writers and storytellers rely on. And you have at the top point, that's the storyteller, that's you, really, probably in this sense here, it's a salesperson. You have your story down here, this is your product or service or your pitch. And you are in complete control of yourself as a salesperson and in complete control of what your product is. But the other piece of this triangle that all feeds into itself is the audience, the person you're trying to sell to, and you cannot control them at all. You have no control over them. It's all about understanding what they are experiencing, what their story is, what they're bringing to this conversation, or what their needs are, and trying to meet them as close to that as possible. So when those three don't all connect, sometimes that means, like we've been talking about, that it's not the right relationship. But people's stories and people's needs and experiences have changed so much in the past week, in the past month, in the past 3 to 4 months, that really you have to shape continuously shape your own story and how you talk about what you do to meet them where their stories are. Did I just make that sound vaguer and more confusing?
No, I mean, that's great. One of the things that I commissioned my team to help me do was, let's build a story based, like an archetypical hero story as it relates to like our company. And let's have two of them. Let's have one that talks to our customers, and let's have one that talks to our VCs, right? The people who we were hoping to fund us. Whereas we are the hero in both stories, but one speaks to venture capital as, on using the structure of archetypes, because those are the stories that we just naturally love more, or follow more. But you know what? It seemed too hard and my team never delivered, so.
Well, it's a great point that you're always talking to to multiple audiences. I hate the term elevator pitch, frankly, because even if you took it at face value, like who else is on this elevator? What are you talking about? How many stories is it going? Like, even that as a metaphor to me doesn't like pan out. So it's going to change, right? And we do this naturally. If I happen to fall off this stool right now, and Darien went to tell like one of our mutual friends about it, he would tell that differently. He would say, like, "Oh, you won't believe what happened to Randy," than if he went to tell it to a complete stranger. He'd be like, "Oh, I know this guy, Randy." And so all of the principles of the story have to change, just based on who his audience is. And that's a natural thing for us conversationally and in our daily lives. But it's tougher to do intentionally, when we're talking about sales.
And as an entrepreneur, sort of pushing your business forward constantly, you have to get really good at adapting that, having sort of like a standard story that you then adapt to whatever audience you're talking about. Because, for us, when we're talking to real estate developers, they want to listen to something, they're interested, although the core is the same, the focus is different than when we're speaking to like venture capital or, guest or you name it.
Danielle has gotten me so interested in her soap in a way that is so different than how she talks to Whole Foods about her soap. The idea, the story, and the product and the service is still the same. Look, I've got this amazing soap, but the audience is different because I'm not going to buy it wholesale and put it in stores.
And the agility to like read your audience fast and apply those differences. So we are going into the final 30 minutes of our conversation. This has gone really fast. Do you guys have any other comments about storytelling? Otherwise, we have other questions that I want to get to.
I think one thing about storytelling that is, I see a lot of the questions about sales for introverts. And I think that with Randy and with everybody else here on the call probably, that the important thing is a good story. And if you know your story, and if you believe your story, and if you are part of your story, then it becomes a lot easier to overcome the nervousness of talking about it. And this is a pretty golden time for introverts to be selling, because you don't have to do in-person sales calls, and that sucks. And so, emails totally work now, and Zoom meetings exist. And that's awesome. So, that, I think the story and knowing how you connect with that is absolutely critical to being an introvert in sales.
Yeah, I'm an absolute introvert. Even every BuzzFeed quiz tells me so. Even the random ones like pick the pie you would order at lunch. Oh, you were an introvert. So everything points to that for me, and it's absolutely true. And for me, I'm much more comfortable typically writing emails and selling that way, or reaching out. It is one thing that I have found I really like about the networking group BNI, that I feel like I'm trying to sell everybody on BNI, but the idea of it is that you develop a relationship with an intimate group of people who you come to know, and it's not trying to network and sell to a bunch of strangers all the time.
I love it's a golden time for introverts to be selling. because it's so true, right? I mean, if you're an extrovert, if you are just a natural salesperson, then you don't need to be in the sales for non-salespeople call. So that makes me feel really good. Let's go back to social media really quick. Jay, I know you mentioned sort of LinkedIn reach out, and I sort of want to explore what each one of you guys does, if anything, to leverage not just direct sales, but maybe just reputation, followers, marketing, blogging. What approach do you take to social media? And I think, Jay, let me know if you have something to add to that.
I mean, actually, for us, marketing and sales are two completely different practices, because marketing is, getting in front of people, and then sales is the extensive process of deal negotiation. So
Yeah.
I actually have somebody else on my team who runs marketing who would probably be able to speak to it better than me in any event.
Cool. Yeah. Sort of the same story with us. Like our social media game is just completely lacking, and it's unacceptable. And I keep telling my team that we have got to put resources, and more than resources, we've got to put attention to our social media. But that's a project for, I guess the rest of the year. What about you, Danielle?
Yeah, so in mid-March, I laid off for a social media person. So it's been a rough road. I've been doing most of the posts myself, and so it's been sporadic. And what I found was that if I write my blogs, which are important for search engine optimization, and I'm a junkie about search engine optimization, if I would keep writing my blogs and auto-publishing them to my social media platforms, that's enough. You can only do what you can do, and you can't do more. Right now, we just can't do more. So, just accepting that, like, this is a unique time and that I can't do everything. And social media has been very, very mixed bag right now. Like I said, about like some of the posts that we've posted have been very, I find it so hard to believe that wearing a mask is a controversial issue, but it is. And so that's a thing. But I think people will argue about anything. So, yeah.
Randy, what's your social media approach?
I've tried to do a lot of LinkedIn engagement. Again, this gets to where it's, I'm a one person plus a brand kind of all wrapped into one. The biggest thing that I've been doing kind of in pandemic time is using Facebook, Zoom, my own blog to kind of build my networks more and bring more of my networks to kind of help worlds collide a little bit. So I started a weekly, I call it the First Story Coffee Break. It's 30 minutes afternoon once a week, where I have one of the people in my network do like a little bit of talk about a topic, and everybody gets to meet each other. Sometimes we have 3 people, sometimes we have 20, but it's just like a half-hour break in the day. And I find that has been something that's been really helpful in kind of expanding the reach and getting to meet new people. In terms of blog and SEO and social media, I have written, I don't know how many newsletter articles for clients since I started my business 4 years ago, and yet have not gotten my own newsletter off the ground. There's a sign up. You could go sign up for it right now, but I still don't know when you're going to get a newsletter. One of those problems about, the color goes with no shoes, or whatever that saying is.
Yeah. Brian?
I would say, I guess unlike some of the other businesses, I don't typically use LinkedIn for my business. I use more of the more prominent ones, Facebook, Instagram, and I started to dabble in Snapchat, but that was a little bit too much for me. But those are my sources of getting my brand out there and getting sales, actually, is through social media. And because it allows for the share, and then for someone to forward the post or tag someone in it, and it kind of gets everybody involved and like, oh, that's nice what he posted, I want one. and it kind of goes from there. Yeah.
Cool. And for this question, I want to bring in my dear colleague, Darien, Marion, Burton, because he is actually a social media expert. So I sense that he has a lot to say about that. Darien?
Yeah, so we comprise probably about 100 Facebook posts per day that come out of our shop. So I think Facebook is a super critical tool in social media in general. I think you really just have to take a very hard look at what your business's goals are and make sure that you have a strategy that's aligned to them. If you're a B2C person, LinkedIn, probably not the best place for you. But things like Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, gonna be huge for you. And likely so if you're a B2B brand, LinkedIn's probably gonna be your main source, and then Facebook. I think B2B brands have a lot of trouble on Instagram. But really it's about picking a clear and consistent voice and making sure that you use that voice in everything that you put on social media. So we talk about storytelling, but every single piece of copy you craft should be about that story. You should be using images that are high quality. And you should be making sure that your posts are timely, right? Social media is a quick reactionary thing. And if you aren't keeping up with those reactions, it can have unexpected consequences. Jay, you were talking about how Black Lives Matter and all these things are playing an issue in marketing and sales. I think that what you're doing on social media right now, I'm seeing a lot of people who have continued to do their normal posting, but now their audiences are asking them really tough questions that they're maybe not prepared to answer. And then the business kind of flounders around a little bit. So I think the best thing is just making sure that your strategy is aligned and making sure that you tell your story in a way that's true to you. If you go on our social media, it's very cheeky, it's very sassy. I say a lot of curse words sometimes. And that's just very much who we are as a brand and like the disruption we want to cause in our industry. And I think that everyone needs to think about that and apply it to their social media and all their marketing strategies.
And I think social media is a ton of work, right? If you're going to do it right, you're going to be spending a ton of attention, at least, to it.
Everything in social media runs on engagement. So if you aren't getting people commenting on your posts, if they're not sharing them, if you're not commenting back on that, if you're not commenting when they share things, all these things play a role in the Facebook algorithm.
Yeah.
And so the goal is to consistently make sure that your posts are being reached by as many people as possible, and that you're maintaining about a 10% engagement rate on those posts based on how many people you've reached.
It's an entire sort of science and industry. And one of the ongoing fights that I had with my team was we needed to be doing more social. And their thing was, no, because we don't really have time to actually do it right. My thing was, well, post anything, whatever, just do it. They won. Our social media is almost non-existent. But I think it's better at least for us, better to do it right than to do it, sort of halfway, which is what we would have done if we had jumped into it when I suggested that we did.
That was absolutely a point that we reached as well. And we're like, because making social media work has to do with, you have to keep up a cadence, right? And like, it is a deep field with people who are experts in it. So you either commit or you don't. And if you commit, you get somebody who is really good at it, unless
Correct.
you personally happen to be the person who's really good at it.
Yeah, you get Darien.
If only.
Guys, we have about 15 minutes left. For our audience, now is the time to get your questions in. Get every question that you want to get asked. And for you guys, there's, if you had to sort of, what's the word? If there's a myth about sales that you want to, what's the word, demystify or get rid of, what would it be? Why don't we start with Jay?
Okay, so I think for me, it's like we have been talking up until this point about sales like it's this unpleasant thing that none of us want to do. And like we have to force ourselves to do it and it feels really bad, right? Like that's the myth for me, right? Like sales should be genuinely pleasurable, right? Like it's an extension of the thing that you're doing anyway. It's just like the empathy, like extension of that. And also that like if a person you are talking to like is not physically cornered by you and they are talking to you for more than 30 seconds, that means that they are a consenting adult who has decided to participate in that sales interaction with you because they think that they have the capability to prospectively get value out of buying something from you, right? Like they control their wallets. They are comfortable giving you money or they wouldn't be talking to you because they know that you're not doing it for free. And it's totally fine to just have the really obvious conversation with them that is like I would like to give you this and I charge this much. What do you think? Because they're not going to come back and say, no, you're evil. How dare you? Like nobody does that other than like weird people on Twitter. Right? Like actually everybody is a human, right? Just as you guys were saying, like everybody is nice. Like they're just going to be like, oh, that works for me. That doesn't work for me. And you're like, okay, well, tell me more about what makes it work or not work for you. Right? And you're like, okay, so how about you give me the money now? And they'll be like, okay, or they'll be like, maybe next time. And then everything is fine.
Right.
Yeah. So there isn't this, we get taught, I think especially as queer people, we get taught so much stigma around just directly asking people for what we want and directly talking about a financial transaction, but money is not actually a sensitive topic in this day and age the way it was in the 50s. And also like if you are trying to sell something complicated to someone and you're not sure how to make it work for them, and you feel really anxious because you're not getting the hang of the conversation, just like ask them. There's a conversation here about like how to approach global markets, right? Or it's the same thing, like how do you approach, the person you're talking to's boss? It's like, well, just say like, so I'm hearing from you that you're kind of interested, but I'm sensing like a little bit of reluctance from you. Tell me what it would take to make this work for you. And they'll just literally lay out like the game plan for you to sell to them. And like, I say that all the time. I'm like, what do I need to do to, get you guys to agree to this? What do I need to do in order to convince your boss? Like they're in it. If they're talking to you, they're in it with you. You guys are on the same side of the table.
Yeah, that's absolutely the right energy, right? Like you are pushing your business forward with every sale. So you should be excited. You should enjoy it. You should, once, get comfortable. And I think practice does a lot. For those of us who may not have been comfortable at the beginning, after you do it and you force yourself to do it, then that sort of momentum and that good energy is released.
Commerce was invented because it's a win-win situation. Like I went and secretly browsed the soap company during this panel, right? And I'm like, that soap is gorgeous. Like it is, my contemplating it is a win-win situation for me.
I like commerce was developed because it's mutually beneficial. That's a good one.
Because mine really builds off the great point that Jay makes. And I think there's a myth that people are always looking for discounts. And too often we may be willing to offer those. I was working with somebody, it was a friend of a friend, and she needed some grad school applications edited. And I was like, well, I can do that, and I'm just going to charge her what she would pay to find somebody on Craigslist, so it was this super cheap rate just to help somebody out. And then when we had a conversation, it really was a lot bigger value that I could bring her, a lot more service that I could do to help her. But I was kind of locked in at this little, very low rate. And so I did everything at that rate. And when bigger, like billable work was coming in, I found myself kind of putting that on the back burner. And then I realized that wasn't even fair to her because she never even knew that was a discounted rate. Like she only knew this one rate. So it was kind of like if you're at Disney World and you're in the long line and then you see people go through the fast pass and you're like, I didn't even know that was an option. Like she didn't even know that she could be a priority client of mine at a full rate because I never told her that there was a separate thing. I just automatically assumed that she needed to lock in at the other rate that I had done.
That's honestly why I hate it when people who are professionals offer me free services, because I want my stuff on time, and I don't want half-ass job that's going to be, second behind their other clients that are paying. I have one friend of mine who keeps sending me, he keeps wanting to do photos for free. And it's like, you lost 3 packages of ours that we sent to you because we're not a priority. We're just not a priority for him. And yeah, we would pay. We do pay. We pay strangers. And so of course we would pay a friend. Like,
Yeah. Any myth that you want to bust on sales from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think we've talked about it a bit before. Like, every sale in the beginning feels so high stakes, but none of them are high stakes. You cannot, no business fails because of one big shitty sales call. Businesses fail because of thousands and thousands of tiny errors over time, but it's not one sales call. And so it's totally fine to flail around, especially if you have like a lot of customers. I mean, obviously Jay's in a different situation where there's not an unlimited number of customers that you can screw up sales calls with, but you're probably a gazillion times more professional than I am. And so you don't flail as much, but I flail a ton, and it's okay. Like, it's fine. And that's something that is, that I think that especially a lot of salespeople feel like the stakes are very high. But the fact is, and I see a lot of product salespeople on here, the fact is that boutiques are very fickle, and they will replace your product very quickly, just as quickly as they pick it up. And so it really is fine. It doesn't even matter. It's fine.
My most humiliating sales call, we'd been selling something to someone for a while, and I convinced her to bring her boss for us to try to do an upsell. And when we met our boss, I was so out of my depth. I cut my internet so that I could pretend I dropped out of the call to buy myself 3 minutes to think. And then I came back and I sputtered a bunch of stuff to the boss. It was terrible. It was the most humiliating thing. But then after that, I was like, okay, well, I survived that call. Future ones were slightly less humiliating.
You didn't die, and now I have a tip for getting out of terrible sales calls.
Yeah, they never called us back again, and I don't blame them, but hey.
The sun still rose the next day. Bryan, what about you?
You're still muted.
I'm sorry, guys. I think my biggest one was using sales scripts to get the sale. Biggest one for me is that, like, I think Randy alluded to it as well about the whole elevator pitch kind of thing, is that there's no right or wrong way. It's just, I think you have to really cater your presentation to the customer, to who you're wanting to get your product or service out there to. And so I never liked the idea of having the elevator pitch and saying the same things and make me sound robotic. It didn't seem authentic. I think is what Danielle alluded to, being authentic. Your authentic self is what really people are attracted to as well. When it's a true, genuine, storytelling, it makes it all worth the while. Versus, just sticking to a script. Hi, my name is Bryan. I'm here to sell such and such. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think from all the takeaways that I could get out of this this conversation, it's being authentic, it's practicing, right? Because you get better as you do it more, and it's quality. If you are offering a product that's quality and that you are confident will meet the needs of whoever you're selling it to, then, like I said, it sells itself. At least it helps you have that confidence to talk about it.
Definitely.
All right, guys, we have 7 minutes, and why don't we sort of share closing thoughts? And in those closing thoughts, if you could share, you have shared so much already, but any tools, any books, anything, any thoughts, anything that has helped you and that you would recommend to sort of someone who has been in the shoes that we have all been before, where now you're a salesperson, regardless of where in the world you are and where in the business sort of time horizon your company is. You've realized that you better start selling. You're not that great at it, but you want to improve that. So, and that's somewhere that we have all been. What would you share with them as sort of our final thoughts? Bryan, let's start with you.
Sure. You mentioned something, when we must, you do. And that really stood out for me. And, you know, during this whole pandemic, racial injustice and things of that nature, like the backstory for me, you know, wanting to do the mask, I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to make it seem like I was trying to profit off of something that was so complex. And so, but like we were saying, was that we have to, at some point, we have to move forward and look at the silver lining in the whole thing. So I definitely appreciate the comment from Randy with the whole thing about storytelling, is that being able to, you know, for my product to be able to tell a story when I make that post on social media, whether it be with a tagline or hashtag on, you know, Instagram or Facebook, is that being able to develop my brand in this at the same process as well. Definitely.
Wonderful, thank you. Randy, what about you?
I think the biggest tip that I've had to learn is to treat, if you're a full-time salesperson, great, then, but I don't think we have many of those on here. So for those of us who juggle lots of different stuff, is to treat sales just like any other project or any other client. For those of us in a billable world, that means, you know, if you track billable hours for another client, track how much time you're spending on sales and look back and see if you've been spending that in the right way, if you need to step it up. And in, you know, then approaching it as you would any other client also includes follow-up and checking in. And so I know some people who do follow-up Friday, where they will say, I saw a great question in the Q&A about, you know, how do you leave it in the client's court, the prospective buyer's court? That's one way, is to say, you know, look, I usually will check back in with people on Fridays or Tuesdays, Wednesdays, pick your time. Do you mind if I check in with you Friday? Or if that's too soon, how about next Friday? And then that puts it in their court to think about it, but gives you the incentive to follow up and gives you the accountability to follow up. So you are making it so that this is not something that you can just push aside, which can so easily happen.
Yeah, prioritization and like discipline, right? Because when you're a small team, no one's going to do it for you. You've got to do it yourself. And if you're not doing it, no one's doing it.
It's very easy to focus on the projects that you can invoice for that day.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's harder to remember that you need to focus on the pipeline of what you're going to invoice in 3 months.
The pipeline, that's something that that's a word that we didn't mention all that much here. But it's important to keep that pipeline. There's, you know, there should always be something there. Whether it's a phone call, an email, anything to have that pipeline moving so that it's never, you're always working with, there's always a possibility of a sale coming one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Danielle?
Yeah, I've listened to and read so many sales books over the years because I am so insecure about my own ability to do sales. And so I've listened to like Zig Ziglar, and Daniel Pink wrote a really wonderful book called To Sell is Human. And there are just a lot of resources out there. I've read something called Fanatical Prospecting, and so many of them just didn't work out for me because of my personality. And I think in this time, not just because of coronavirus, but because of everything, that there's no one way to do sales. And you have to find a way that works right for you. And if you are your own boss, if you're not like a professional salesperson, but if you have your own business, you have the ability to craft your life into what sales works for you. And so for me, doing cold phone calls to busy boutique owners is really hellish. I mean, yeah, I'm glad I had the experience of pushing myself to do it, but I didn't find it outstandingly valuable. What I do find valuable is building up really cool relationships with amazing direct to consumer customers who care about us so much to go in and talk to boutiques themselves. Like, that's cool. I love that. And that works for me. So to me, you have to figure out, like, there's no one way. You can sell on social media, you can sell direct, you know, through emails, you can find brand partnerships, you can get brand advocates, you can sell on Facebook, you can do any number of things, whatever
Thank you,
works
Danielle.
for
Let me,
you.
before
Yeah,
we get
sorry.
to 7:30, let me go to Jay.
Yeah, everything you say is so brilliant, Danielle. I love that so much. Okay, I will mention one thing that hasn't come up yet, which is for anybody who's actually doing B2B sales, 2/3 of, this is really specific, but 2/3 of your sales strategy is about the billing and acquisitions policy of your client company, right? So like whether they can buy from you completely depends on their annual fiscal cycle and where in their annual fiscal cycle they are. And how much you should price completely depends on their pricing approval tiers, which for most people, there's a gate at around 10,000, there's a gate around 20,000, there's a gate around 100,000 approximately.
Yeah.
But like, just, you need to go into your client organizations and figure out all of those policy things, because if you miss that, you're never going to land in the right people at the right time. And timing is everything on B2B.
Right. It's almost
you know,
like speaking the language that your client speaks, right? Like knowing when those decisions are made.
Yeah, because like they have restrictions on when they can buy from you, and you're never gonna, no matter how much they love you, if you don't follow their restrictions, it's not gonna work.
That's a key point.
And
Thank you guys. What a wonderful conversation. I really am grateful that you were able to join us and share so much. Thank you again to Darien, Marion, Burton, and to David Alfini. Thank you to Start Out, and thank you most of all to everyone who joined us today. I hope you found this to be helpful. This conversation will be posted on the Start Out YouTube channel. So I know you want to hear our voices again, so go listen to it again, because there was probably something that you missed, and share it as well with friends who you think this would be beneficial to. And spread the word about Start Out, a wonderful organization for LGBTQ plus entrepreneurs and allies. So thank you guys again, and have a good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.